We're back.
Yes.
Back.
You said we weren't going to do this till tomorrow.
I lied. Woo, man, it feels good to be back.
Got to keep them guessing.
Well, if people, we should record our phone calls, and then
we
arguments about our
we definitely shouldn't.
The arguments that we have about our phone calls are maybe better than our normal phone calls. So it's good to be back.
I mean that's accurate, but the implications, the further implications of recording our phone calls probably wouldn't. No.
Can you imagine if our lawyers sat in on one of our phone calls between the two of us?
I mean, they would just be seeing dollar signs. So
yeah, they would either be like cutting the cord to the phone or just sitting back and be like, okay, it's your bill, homie. I'm not really sure how to let this play out.
Bold strategy gotten.
Yep. How you feeling this morning, buddy?
I'm feeling good. Got a workout in. Got the breakfast down already. Looking at some positive news. I mean, we had the markets had a great quarter this last quarter. Job report was good. Like we've talked about. It seems like the engine out here in the Permian is revving up. I don't know. Just like on the back of a 4th of July. I mean, America.
America, let's go. If we ever decide to live in the same county, no, I said city, I said county, opposite ends, and we record these shows in a studio, I demand that we do a green screen, and then between me and you, it's Zuckerberg riding the hovercraft with the American flag, like every morning. Like that's how we come into the show. That's what we need. Morning, fellas.
We've got Scott coming in. Scott, appreciate it. I'm with it. Yeah, absolutely. No, I mean listen, that clip we started yesterday's show off with, I mean, I'd be okay with that just in the background at all times here, just running.
Just on loop.
Absolutely.
Who?
Just injected in the veins right there.
So the question is, this cyborg, he's a cyborg. We all agree that, right? So, but does he get the joke? Or does he think people are going to be like, wow? So just imagine like him calling
if you have that much money, you don't care about the joke. You don't care if you're the butt of the joke. You don't care about whether you started the joke. No. You're just out there doing you, living your best life.
Speaking of that, before we get into the show, did you know, and this shows my ignorance here, let me know in the comments if I'm the only person in the world who didn't know this, that the DeLorean was named after a person. I just thought it was a cool name and a cool car. But there's actually a dude, and Netflix is making a documentary about it.
It's a badass documentary too. If you haven't watched it, it's about the John DeLorean story. It is fascinating. So I'll answer you this way. I knew he was a real person. Had no idea about the real story, about the story. But I watched that documentary last week, and that it just goes to show, again, it's another story in the litany of stories of big companies sees a threat by some innovation, and
Well, and the reason I brought it up was A, because I was just curious. I didn't know. But two, the documentary teases it out is he has a lot of money and he was concerned about what people thought. It's kind of what I got from the trailer. So I do.
Just to be clear, in the list, A and 2 is 3. Like, is that Roman numeral 3 or like what's the next?
We go to beta. We go to the Greek alphabet at that point. Yeah, and then we go to Klingon for 4.
If you can count to 10 in Klingon, I'll be impressed.
Yeah, well, okay. Listen, I went A to 2. A2, that's what I did. Did we need to skim this thing? Is it over? Like, we just didn't call it? I'm going A to 2? Wow. I didn't realize it was that bad.
Tim, appreciate you coming in. Ryan, if you haven't seen it. And also, Ryan, you and I were talking about to throw another documentary at the wall here, I guess. Or I shouldn't say documentary. That's a poor choice of words. But the motion picture, America, the motion picture, the satire. Did you watch it last night by chance?
No, last night I watched. What?
It's pretty funny. What? It's pretty. What? No, I'll just say it's pretty funny. No, the show. I was going to say no. What did you guys watch?
Okay, last night I watched Fear Street Part 1, 1994, which just came out on Netflix. It's a 3-part horror film series that they're doing, and so. So anyways, Scott says that Enzo Ferrari is also named after the founder. See, I'm not a car person, and so that's probably like, I guess I should suspect that Ford, obviously for Ford, but GMC is this GMC, but like Toyota, I don't know. I don't really dig into stuff like that. It's never been of interest to me, so I will say a lot of ignorant stuff when it comes to car names and stuff. Just FYI.
So, if we're done talking about cars, yeah.
Sorry for the squirrel. We changed the yard. He got gone.
Let's go ahead and
go ahead.
Yeah, no, I know. A few weeks back, if you remember, there was a major disruption at JBS, which is one of the world's largest meat suppliers, and it came out that there was a Russian-backed hacker firm behind that. Looks like they are circling back and making the news once again. Have hacked, actually this time, a litany of different software companies and other service providers, from a Swedish grocer to some other domestic in the U.S. So a couple of things here that I wanted to unpack here before I just kind of hand it off to you. Number one, it looks like this has been a coordinated attack, like I mentioned, at a number of different vulnerable firms, and this was not just one, and they have not relinquished control yet. The article that I read this morning talking about ransom at the end of $70 million was, but there's an interesting wrinkle to this, that the hack this time overtook individual computers and is looking at at keeping each of those at ransom individually, as opposed to like JBS paid one lump sum. Number one, I think, if I remember correctly, Ryan, it might have even been Bringing the Closers, but certainly sometime on Don't Let the Facts, we talked about the dangers and sort of the concerns necessary around cybersecurity and hacking. And if I remember correctly, you were pretty firm in that stance just in the last year or so, that was not really a concern, didn't really need, was sort of blown out of proportion. I'm curious if the advent of what we've seen in the past has changed your opinion on that whatsoever, if I do remember the record correctly, which I think I do. And then also, if you want to talk about this specifically in regards to, these just malicious attacks just purely for money, or do you think this is sort of a part of a larger scheme? And if you want to hack up along, that's okay too.
I'm done over here. I'm trying. Okay, so the context would be that my belief on cyber attacks, generally speaking, is go if I can speak. The threat only goes as long as the government allows it to go. And so what I mean by that is Joe Biden, or insert president here, when they attacked the Colonial Pipeline or Dominion Pipeline, whatever it was a few months ago, if they would have authorized a drone strike and blown up the terrorist, it would be hard for anyone to argue they were not protecting national security. And so you're muted. You're making a great point, but you're muted.
Doesn't that presume that you know exactly how, when, and where to attack the source of the hack in real time?
Well, a couple things. One, we have this thing called the Fed, right? And I'm dying over here. I'm trying. Sorry. We have this thing called the Fed. Let's talk reality here. This isn't CNBC. This is real talk. All right. The first thing is there are a multitude of federal agents on the internet pretending to be hackers and in chat rooms and working. Now I say multitude. I don't have the number, but they're there conspiring. I say conspiring. They're working with the people conspiring. Well, and we can talk about that. Let's don't let the facts. We'll go on that. Don't let the facts. But Thursday, 3 o'clock. The other thing is, it's hard for me to imagine a world in which a cybersecurity threat happens, and the government doesn't open up the coffers and pay for a tip that leads to the drone strike, right? And they never publicize it, and they may even kill the guy they pay the money to. Like, okay, like you have to deal in the world of reality here, not the.
This is morning off the rails. Don't let the facts.
We're off the rails, baby. I'm over here coughing up a lung. I'm dying of COVID.
By the way, I'll give you a minute to collect yourself. Mornings off the rails. If you want to call in and talk to Ryan about what he's about to say here, 817-601-7031, 817-601-7031. Keeping in mind that you gotta come correct if you're gonna come at Ryan. He's now out of frame. I don't know what's going on. Hopefully he's back live here.
I'm really alive.
Ryan, are you with us?
Hey, go read the stories of the suitcases of money we took to the Afghanis to pay them off. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I hear what you're saying. It's hard to find them, possibly. Okay, but I think we as Americans forget the limit that our government will go to find someone that they don't like.
I think what I'm saying here is, okay, so for some reason, and this is gonna sound aggressive, but for some reason in the Middle East, we have sort of carte blanche to run targeted drone attacks at a specific building if we believe that there are terrorists in that building and we can justify the attack. Okay, sure. That's just kind of normal practice. If we were to go into St. Petersburg, Moscow, Beijing, Shanghai, and blow up a building because we knew there were terrorists there, you think that those governments are going to react the same way that the
right?
And
so
you can't. I mean, right?
You're making a great point. No, you are making you are giving me the proper response, and I'm glad you did. You are giving me the proper objective to my point. To that, I would say, Putin or insert country here wants to stay in power. They are just as much incentivized to go kill the hackers as the U.S. is, and so what you think that the what? So if Putin so if Putin really thought that the U.S. was going to drop a bomb in Russia, and all he has to go do is go whack the hackers, they're gone. It's over. There's no thing. Putin, what? Yes, of course. What?
Absolutely not. Why in the world? Why in the world would Putin do that when the political theater that he would be able to play after the U.S. came in and bombed within Russia when there was no actionable war or whatever? I mean, you think that he's not going to take the opportunity for that? Are you kidding me? You think he's going to go murder his own person to yes. save the U.S.?
First off, he murders his own people because they ate the wrong buffet on Tuesday. Okay,
because they pissed him off. But that's different. That's different. If they hacked the KGB, I mean, right. They wouldn't make the breakfast.
Okay, so you got to think about it in terms of power. Putin wants to stay in power. If the U.S. were to, and we're talking about a hypothetical here, but if they were really serious, let's say they shut down multiple nuclear power plants in the U.S. and thousands of people died, and we came out before we invaded Iraq and said we've got proof, and we showed all this stuff, and we said if Russia does not turn them over, we're coming in. I would bet a lot of money that Putin would have them killed, extradited, whatever, because Putin understands that if the U.S. invades, he might not come out. Okay, he's going to lose the war, A, but B, he might come out dead or in jail. So there is no win for Putin. People think that if you think that Putin wants to go to war, you're missing what he's saying. Putin wants the power, and the way he keeps the power is he keeps saber rattling with the U.S. And as long as the U.S. stays outside of its borders, he's fine. If the U.S. crosses that threshold, he would legitimately his position of power. I'll give you one more example. There's a reason why Kim Jong-un doesn't actually ever attack anything of substance, because he knows if he crosses the line, it's over. It's over. So the thesis has to be that Putin, Kim Jong-un, whomever, and this is fine, you can make this, are so crazy that they are willing to risk it all. And I don't think they are. I think they like the position of power. So would Putin have someone whacked? Sure. Go ahead. What?
I'm failing to see the thread of the argument here. I mean, I get what you're saying, but if you look at the Middle East has been a harbinger and a guardian of terrorists for the last 20 years. Okay, let's just talk about the last 20 years. Sure. For the last 20 years, and the U.S. has occupied that area. The U.S. has had an active occupation in an active war zone for those 20 years. We have repeatedly, hundreds of times, bombed individual buildings on the notion or the verification that there were terrorists in said building. And if what you're saying is true, I think that Russia, China, whoever, I guess those are the big two, would make an allegiance or make an alliance with those countries so that it was an affront to them, and so that they had the same, so that they could use it as the same excuse that you're talking about now. Where I don't think that's I don't think that's right at all. I mean, you don't see the Middle Eastern powers punching back. You really don't. I mean, you sort of see them allowing what happens in their borders. Actually, kind of both ways. They're very kind of laissez-faire about the whole thing, which is a whole different conversation.
Let's go to Iran. Okay, Iran. They fired. We killed Soleimani, right? And then
Yeah.
what did they do? They fired a missile to the far reaches of a military base that we have in Iraq, so they didn't hit anybody. They did that on
Right.
purpose. They missed everybody on purpose so that they could
Sure.
turn around and say, "Hey, look, we fought back against the Americans." Da da da. If they wanted to shoot towards the middle of the base where everyone's at or wherever it's at, they could have. They didn't. They missed everyone on purpose.
Well, no, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, so because if they crossed that threshold, if they would have actually killed American soldiers on our base, we probably would have drone strike. They didn't. So they're not trying. They're not. Iran doesn't actually want an act of war. Neither does Putin. They want to push the limits as far as they can. So in this case, the thesis here is, if it is enough for the U.S. to cross the border, to go in, to actually invade or to drone strike or whatever, the government is likely to capitulate. That's the thesis, because they don't want to.
No, I think we're pivoting off the point, because what we're talking about here is because there's no axiomatic link between a hacker group and the government. So as an example, let's say it's a hard right wing anti-democracy Chinese faction that happens to be set up in Moscow. Are you telling me that the Russian government is going to go eradicate this Chinese hacker group because they're in their borders? I don't get it.
If they thought the U.S. was actually going to bomb them, yes. To be clear, my thesis that I'm putting forth is, if Russia believes the U.S. is going to drop a bomb inside of their borders, and it is not a Russian condoned act, like it's not Russia trying to go to war, it is a hacker cell inside there, that they would eradicate or give those people up to prevent the U.S. from doing that. Because the Russians cannot respond to the U.S. If they do, it's an act of war, and Putin believes, because he's a smart guy, he loses.
But I think what you're missing, because I mean, everything you just said, I agree with. But where I'm coming from is that the U.S. bombing the hacker group outside of a declaration of war is an act of war, and so it's the U.S. provoking war.
Okay. Make sure we're clear. Let's go back to what we said. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, good.
I say, so make sure we're on the same page. The construct here is Chinese hacker cell in Russia, just to use your analogy, in St. Petersburg, hacks multiple U.S. power infrastructure plants, shuts them down. Tens of thousands of Americans are left without power. Hundreds die. Okay. Joe Biden comes out the next day and says, "We know who it is. They're in St. Petersburg, Russia. It's this Chinese hacker group that lives there. They have no affiliation with the Russian government. However, if they do not release these people by whenever, we will drop a bomb. We will drop a drone strike over on this building and kill them all. You got 6 hours or 20 hours or whatever it is to comply." Russians comply, because if they don't comply and Biden goes forth and he drops a bomb, Putin can't. Here's what Putin can't do. He can't say, "Well, justice was served." He is now neutered as the leader of Russia. He has to respond. Well, if he responds, you get to this whole thing of the totalitarian. If he responds now, what's the U.S. going to do? The U.S. is going to say, "Bro, all you had to do was turn him over." You go to war, a real war at that point. So to prevent it, which Putin does not want, he will work with the U.S. I think I found it hard to believe.
I think that thread makes sense. I think I was looking at it from another prism.
Yeah.
That's interesting. All right, so let's if you've got anything else on that, or
real quick, I am curious. Let's take away the worst name. This is being done with Bitcoin. I do have a concern here. Let's go back to the same thread. I do have a concern here that corporations and private individuals will turn to the government and say, "Hey, government, we need you to protect us from hackers." And the government says, "Well, if people don't use that Bitcoin, it would sure tighten things up on us. It would sure tighten security up." So I think that is a threat to watch for.
Oh, absolutely. That's going to be. Look, the government over the next 5-10 years is going to use, or actually maybe not even that long, the next 2 to 5 years is going to use all sorts of reasons to talk about Bitcoin and talk about regulation and find a way to try to get in there. So
I think cybersecurity is a bigger threat for our personal security than it is anything else, because if this continues, then the government will try to protect us from ourselves, as they always do. So anyways.
Yeah, they're good at trying about that. I prompted you this morning uncharacteristically with a question here. I'm gonna ask it to you on air. I'm gonna ask it to you exactly the way I asked it, and I'm gonna see how you respond. So, Ryan, why don't, make sure you look at the air quotes here. Why don't libertarians, with air quotes, libertarians believe in free trade policy, which would allow for cheaper, more reliable global chain supply management? It seems like we have a major crisis on a global scale with supply chain management. It seems like if we were to kind of reapproach how we look at global trade, that might provide some answers. Why do you think it's a bad idea?
You're talking to me? This Ryan?
Yeah.
I read that and I was like, wait, how am I getting this shot thrown at me on the show this morning? What'd I do now? The cat. The 20-pound cat. What'd I do to deserve this abuse?
I don't know. But I will say that no, but let me ask you a different question, I guess, related to the same topic. What do you think, or when do you think, I should say, that we're going to see some of this global supply chain management issues level out? Do you see this at this point more as sort of artificial demand supply constriction from governmental or other other pressures? Do you see this as actually a restriction of commodity or restriction to access of the commodities, etc.? And so, sort of, how do you see this kind of alleviating on a global scale? And then I want to talk about domestic.
Yeah, let's talk about the free trade issue because it is important, real quick. Free trade only exists in a world where the laws are equitable and clear and upheld, right? So part of the problem we have now is that there's not exactly clarity on all the laws in all the countries. So that is part of the problem. And then you have these governmental deals, which makes it more convoluted and unclear and all this stuff. And then you have government-owned companies, which impact prices. And so there's a lot of problems. We're a long way from free trade in the truest sense of the word. As for the impact on the supply chain and markets, I think we're still a little ways to go because, first off, I don't know. I haven't followed unemployment in emerging markets to know what's going on there. I know in the U.S. we have record high job openings right now. Now I'm always a little leery of that because I could open up 1 billion jobs for Ray Global Advisors tomorrow. It doesn't mean I'm actually going to hire anyone, right? So I'm not exactly sure how much stock I would put into that number as being 100% true, but it is something to watch that we are claiming to have a bunch of jobs that are open. The other thing is, when does the unemployment benefits run out? September, right?
Something like that. Yeah.
So until everyone gets back to work, or whatever they're going to do, I think it's hard to know where we're at in that process as well. The other thing is, if you look at like the cattle industry, talking to some ranchers here recently, they're quite frustrated because there's a lack of processing plants going on, and the meat processors are paying substantially less for the cow, but selling it at a 3 or 4x on the back end. And so it's like, well, and that's because they're so backed up. So anyway, so I don't think you resolve that problem overnight.
Yeah, no, I don't think so at all. But I think that one of the main pieces here that you touched on that's really important is, and I totally lost my train of thought.
While you're thinking, I'll go back to the cattle thing real quick.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So on the cattle thing, the issue is that if you have if you want to run 500 head through the processing plant, you have to book that out in advance. Like some processing plants are booked to 2022, which means you can't expand your cattle farm because you're not sure you get to the processor. There's not a lot of new processors being built, so cattle farmers are kind of stuck in this process of how do they manage their farms, and that's a very small issue. Now, if you're a big farm, it's a little bit different. Go back to last year in the pandemic. We were slaughtering animals. Remember that? We were slaughtering the pigs and maybe the cows as well because we didn't know what to do with them. So I think we're a long ways from things. I say a long ways. That's a relative term. I think this time next year, we'll be talking about some of these issues. They'll look different. We'll figure out how some of these big companies innovated and worked around it and how some of the small guys worked around it. But it's going to take a while. You just don't go through something like this and recover overnight. And to use a very crude analogy, this would be like a married couple with one person has an affair. It takes a long time to get the trust back, to get the order, the flow of the house back. There's a lot of things that happen. It's going to take years for that relationship to be smooth. This is a global shutdown that we did. It's going to take a while to to really figure out what's next for us.
Yeah, and I think when you couple on to that the bad timing here of the excessive drought that you're seeing in the Western United States and a lot of other parts in the world, I think that's going to exacerbate some of this. I think that we're seeing, and you may have a better perspective on this given your your more international reach, but I think that we're seeing massive food shortages in large parts of Africa right now that are unprecedented even for those regions, and that doesn't seem to be an issue that is on the bell curve up by any means, and arguably is going to continue to get worse. And what does that mean for global supply chain mechanics? And I know that Africa doesn't seem to be, and again, you're going to have a better perspective on this than I, but they don't seem to have a major foothold outside of the international influence. In other words, Africa in recent has welcomed a influx of major Chinese dollars to build out infrastructure, but that's not Africa development. In my mind, that's more Chinese development, arbitraging into a different continent. But if you look at what Africa supplies, I mean, they supply an unbelievable amount of resources for the globe, which I think is sort of a buried lead to a degree. And if that region sort of continues to spiral down, I think that this is an issue that people are not giving the appropriate weight, and I'll put myself in the column of somewhat concerned about this on a global, larger scale. When when coupled with what we're doing with the energy perspective and sort of cutting off that silo or at least restricting that silo, I think it paints a pretty complex, possibly pretty grim picture.
What perspective? I didn't hear you. What you cutting off?
That this is an issue that the food shortage. These are major problems. I guess I don't.
Did you say amnesty at the end? You said we're cutting off that silo. I didn't hear what you said. You said energy. Energy. Okay, energy. Okay, I was like amnesty. I was trying to figure out how you tied that in. Okay, yeah, I got you now. Yeah. So if you just go look at Kenya for the last 18 months, they've had biblical-like locust plagues that have hit them, floods. It has been, disastrous for their economy. There is and we could spend a whole show on this. I think the thing to watch with Africa is, first, the international dollars are going to have to flood down there because of the damage from COVID-19. I don't see how we get around that. That's one. Two, how many sub-Saharan Africans, and I don't follow north like Egypt. I don't follow those nations as closely. Sub-Saharan is really kind of where I follow. So how many sub-Saharan Africans will move and migrate from country to another country or leave the continent and go to like Europe or something like that? That is something to watch as well, because we get that another day. But some of the points that you point out and other things factor into that. So there are a lot of things. And then when you look at how are we going to figure out, and it's not us, the Africans, the various Africans have to figure this out themselves. How are they going to, stabilize the nation, invest in themselves? One of the things that you're hearing, and this is quite, I'm very pleased to hear this, and we'll see if it happens, is there's really a strong push to take those local crops that you talked about and process them in country. That is really a big push you're hearing, especially in Western Africa right now, is, if we've got cocoa, or if we've got, cotton, or if we've got soybean, or whatever the crop is, we want to process it in country as much as we can and then export that out. Because right now, what they're doing is they'll take a plant, put it on a ship, process it wherever, and then bring it back, and had to pay for the processed good, right? So why not process some of it in country? And so you're seeing a big push for that. Those are the types of things that really need to happen. And my encouragement has been, and will continue to be, is try to work with local small investors in the U.S. that can come in and work with those things. Those are big, major, complicated issues, of course, but we need to quit pushing these multinational corporations who have infinite dollars and aren't always the best at solving problems like this on sub-Saharan Africa. So, anyways, but yeah, I think you're right. It's a legitimate concern. And talking with the cattle farmers, they're concerned about meat in the future because of how we've handled some of this stuff for the past 16 to 18 months. So. Mm-hmm.
I know in the past, you and I have talked about the interest from specifically the Chinese Asia region and some parts of Africa in deploying capital in U.S.-based projects. Is that still, after COVID, is that still a focus, or is that something that has sort of changed with the winds here?
So yeah, my read is that there's a lot of Chinese money that wants to come to the U.S., but right now it's just slow to get here, or hard to get here, or really tied up. And so, um, that's a Xi Jinping to Joe Biden problem, right? So
Would you say the restrictions or sort of the hesitancy is more on loosening the purse strings or relinquishing the dollars out of the Chinese economy, or is it more of the entrance into the American economy? Where do you see sort of the biggest
yeah,
tension?
the U.S. Yeah, great question. So the U.S. obviously has some things that make it a little bit tricky to get the money in. However, there is a lot that's being held up on the Chinese side because the Chinese rightfully, if you're a communist dictatorship, rightfully don't want the money leaving their economy, especially if you lock people in their houses for months on end. And I say locked, I mean like sealed with a welding torch, and you actually, and so I suspect if that opens up, you will see a massive flood of Chinese investment to the U.S.
Can you? I mean, this might be a naive question. I'm curious. I guess I've never thought about it. I mean, can you pay for a steak dinner in Beijing with U.S. dollars?
So when I was in China, and I don't know what the status is now, but WeChat, everyone had WeChat, and then there was another app. We use WeChat, and WeChat you pay with everything. Like if you would get a taxi, and I don't know if I just you'd hold if you held up dollars or yuan like cash, they would just you held up your phone and your QR scanner, like you hold up like this, and they'd pull over and pick you up.
Can you put the QR scanner of the wallet on the?
Yeah, that's why I was like, let me not. So I never saw. I don't think I ever saw cash of any currency change hands. It was all the digital currency.
It's amazing that you can actually transact in a country as large as like China with digital currency. There's another digital currency that's kind of floating around that's been talking about there for a long time, but governments keep saying that it's not possible to do that. No comment?
Are you talking about gold?
Sure. No, barrels of oil. Barrels of oil.
Okay. Oh, Doge. Oh, Doge. You're such a big Doge guy. I wasn't thinking. Sorry.
Huge. I stand for Doge, guys.
Oh,
Doge is the GOAT. All right. Before we sign off here, quick thoughts. We'll pick this up either sometime later this week or next week when we record Morning Off the Rails again. Quick plug, by the way, we are live on YouTube, both the DLTF Media Group YouTube and War Room Media. So go check those out. That's like Ryan and I talked about last week. That's going to be where we're really going to be focusing the attention. And to be honest, the user experience is substantively better over there. So if you want to hop over there, that's really going to help us because we are going to be transitioning off of maybe not off of, but certainly away from LinkedIn and Twitter and really focusing on YouTube. Would love a subscribe and a follow on those as well. But Ryan, before we sign off real quickly, the first 6 months of the year is we're what a week into the second half of the year here just passed. We had some unprecedented liquidity events in the last 18 months in which sort of fair to assume, and then we saw in a litany of M&A activity to the point where the M&A activity actually in the first half of 2021 broke a 40-year record in terms of baseline dollars, and that's corrected for inflation, etc. Do you see that trend continuing in the second, and or as a continuation? And final thoughts here for the podcast this morning. You and I have talked about on Don't Let the Facts and this show about at some point, that stimulus and that those liquidity events have to leave the system, or some sort of restructuring here, whether that be raising of interest rates. What do you foresee sort of the second half of the year looking like in terms of this? Do you think that the market is just going to continue to run away, or do you think that we're going to start to see kind of a leveling off?
Yeah. Okay. So a couple things. One, I'm trying to find this real quick. I should have done this before the show. If you go back and look at headlines, January, February last year, and maybe December of 2019, there was a lot of headlines talking about the amount of dry powder that was sitting there on the sidelines, waiting for the next recession. Okay, like they were just ready to go.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and so some of that, what we're seeing is that capital is now being deployed. And if you go back to the start of the pandemic, you look like Carnival Cruise Line, when they were in trouble, you saw some of that money wanting to be deployed. They were ready to take down Carnival Cruise Line, but things happen. Don't want the facts. And so the fact that we're seeing that, oh, by the way, we're talking about changing capital gains tax and all this other stuff. If you are a business owner who thinks that you can get out now and either set yourself up for a new startup, or go into retirement, it's a great time because there's been talk of retroactively implementing that capital gains tax, right? Think about that. So, so I think there's a lot of dry powder. You have a lot of boomers, and I don't use that term derogatory, just an age group who are looking to retire. And a lot of businesses are probably out there for the cheap right now. So I don't know if it'll continue because I don't know. I had to go back and look at the metrics, see how much we had versus how much was deployed. But it doesn't surprise me to see the headline. I'll say that.
Yeah, no, and I love the point there. And what I'd add to that is if you think of sort of the life cycle, there are some generations now that are sort of on that cusp of retirement-ish age, and maybe 2020 push them over the edge. It's like, all right, it's time. I'm ready to go on to the next phase, even if it was a couple years before plan or something of that nature. I think there's a lot. You saw a lot of that. I mean, look at the cottage industries of micro hotels, veterinary clinics. A lot of the service industries, you saw a ton of aggregation, and I think a lot of that was sort of that. Hey, listen, if this is where the market's going, I can clock out 3 years early and take an exit here. Give me the payout, and I'll be gone, sort of deal.
Yeah, especially if you're an older landlord and you're like, okay, wait, hold on. The government can keep me from collecting rent. Do I want to be in this business for the next 20 years? There's a lot of things. We talked about those implications earlier. It's hard for us to think about how everyone thinks, but those are potential things. And the other thing I'll say is, and you would know the space better, whatever dry powder was in the market before COVID hit, a substantial amount of money was made. So it could be that we actually have a substantially more dry powder ready to be deployed than even we had in January or February of last year. So that is something to watch as well, because you go back and go, well, we had this much, we deployed this much. Well, they could have doubled or tripled their money last year by investing in stocks and whatnot.
So I won't speak to how Forbes, how the article here came to these numbers. I don't know what the metrics were, but just to give some context here. Globally, it looks like there were 28,175 M&A deals done between January 1 and the end of June. So we're talking about just over 28,000 individual deals, which is 27% higher than last year's total. But here, even more notably, Ryan, it's 7% higher than the first month of any year since 1999, which is a long time.
Hold on. What happened after 1999?
Why don't you tell us? Thank you. What did you tell us?
Well, let me get the exact date here. Let's see here. Whoop. Sorry. This would be. Go ahead. I'm trying to find the date.
All right. So while he's following that up, another stat that I thought was just pretty shocking. The total value of those 28,175 deals was $2.82 trillion.
Yes.
Which notably is up 132% over last year, which is massive. And then again, it's a nearly 20% all-time high over the previous all-time high, or so nearly 20% bump over the previous all-time high, which was back in 2007. And Ryan, what happened right after 2007? And so there's a story here. Do you find what you're looking for?
Yeah, the dot-com bubble burst. I think March 10th of 2000. Does that sound right? Best I can tell.
That sounds good. Right. Yep.
Okay. So you had the dot-com bust and the housing crisis. I was trying to figure out when I couldn't remember if the dot-com was 99 or 2000, but it was right. And it was right there. I was trying to find the day.
So I know that we're running over here. We've been on air for about 40 minutes at this point. But the last point I want to make here, and maybe we can pick it up on Don't Let the Facts, or maybe if you're not doing anything later today, we might be able to talk you into getting on air. I know you don't like to, but maybe we can reboot this and try again. But no, I think it is incredibly important to parse out here that what we're talking about is, okay, so in 2021, in the first 6 months, we have seen unprecedented growth in areas that prior all-time highs when they were set. What happened next? And this has happened 3 times in a row now. What happened next? And so history repeats itself.
Same year. Like this is the same.
What?
Like those two metrics from 99 and 2000 both happened in 2021.
So exactly. So the pace is quickening. No, but the point, I think the takeaway is to think that we are going to not repeat the same cycle is foolhardy. History repeats itself time and time again unless you change. And Ryan, have the big banks, have government changed how they react to these situations?
If by change for the better, you mean no. If you mean for the worse, then yes.
Have they even changed for the worse? Aren't they just pulling the same ripcord? They're giving out liquidity like it's freaking candy to industries that don't need it, shouldn't be getting it, and don't have any real restrictions on how it's used.
Right. So this time
they did that twice.
Right. What I'm saying worse is this time they shut down businesses. They passed long-term.
Okay. Fair.
Right. Yeah. No.
Fair. Okay.
Preventative evictions.
But so Brian, notably, I think the comments have gone silent. I think that we might have scared off the people here, but no,
it is.
But no, I think no. But look, I mean, I think that's really kind of I was when I looked at the numbers from this article, it really kind of hit me over the head about just how non-coincidental the timing is here. And you and I, for the last 9 months at least, have been talking about sort of a brace for impact. But with the midterms coming, maybe that doesn't hit as soon. Maybe this is purely political. Any comment there before we sign off here? I think that's a good place to stop.
Yeah, and the final thing is, I'll say is I think the number was $3 trillion in dry powder, but I couldn't find that. So that might be, if that number's right, where it grew to, I don't know. But I want to say $3 trillion was the dry powder number back in January. But does that sound right to you?
I remember a number closer to 6, but
okay.
Well, it was a huge number, whatever it was.
Either they spent, if my number's right, and they spent basically all that money in the first half of 2021, assuming they didn't make any more. If your number's right, then we've got another $3 trillion in the bank to go, roughly. Final thing is we started off by saying this is not CNBC. If you want the milquetoast, do you think that the congressman is mad about Peter Thiel's IRA? And if you think that's the kind of, then you're at the wrong show. I'm sorry, go somewhere else. This is not for you. This is not for you.
No, just to be clear, what I meant was that there might not be a politically okay comment to put in the comments unless you're on air that we're just firing at will.
Yeah.
But, we may not have people wanting to join in the fray.
They don't want
that's what I was talking about.
Like us. Okay,
yes.
I got. Okay, yes.
Yes.
I retract my previous comment.
All right, Ryan. Well, as always. I think we had an idea of where this was going to go when we got on there. It didn't go there at all. We ended up somewhere out in left field in the bleachers, but we brought it home. We brought it home. You're now turning blue again. Do this for me. Do this for me. What? I don't understand what's going on there. That's weird. That's strange. But why don't you fire up the music? Let's get out of here. If we feel so inclined, maybe we'll do this again later today. If not,
Roth coming on Inside the War Room.
Yes, sir. When is that?
I recorded today at 2:30, so I don't know if I have time this afternoon or not, but maybe
will that be live, or is that just going to be on the podcast?
That's going to be your podcast, Inside the War Room. And hey,
all right.
Listen, yesterday we had a legend, and I mean legend, on Texas Long Gas Podcast, the Oracle of Midland himself, the founder, the CEO, the president, the board of directors, all of those for Source Park Midstream, the one, the only, the man, the myth, the legend, Ben Samuels. He is the best there is, the best there was, and the best there ever will be. Was on Texas Long Gas Podcast. So go download it.
I had a good time on that one. Josh, I appreciate you not showing up. If you ever decide to take another rest day, Ryan, if you want to tap me in for the bullpen again, I'll hop in. I appreciate the invite. Thursday, 1:00 p.m., Coffee and Liquidity. We're talking this week with Keith Stelter, Arc Energy. Going to have a good one there. And then, Ryan, you and I back 3 p.m. Central. Don't want the facts. 3 p.m. Central Thursday, as always.
If you thought this was aggressive.
Buckle in, buddy.
Oh, that's funny.
Man, I before we sign off real quick, I just want to give another shout out. The standing thing, it took us a while to figure this out. I don't know how you feel about it, but I'm liking this. I like where we're at here.
It's great. It's the best thing ever. Yes.
For those of you not paying attention, Ryan also made an announcement. This might be private, but he's also going to start leaning into TikTok a lot more. Downloaded the account. He's
Press the button. Press the button. Oh, gracious.
All right. Cut it.